I'm ready to get started. I'm waiting for Dr. Parker to come back in. He's on a call, but there's some stuff that we can get started with prior to his return, since we have a quorum. We'll call to order the Administrative Committee meeting for April 13th, 2018. Do we have any, do any of my colleagues have any concerns that they'd like to express? Hearing none. How about report on approved travel, Mr. Nastri?
No out-of-country travel, Dr. Burke.
Talk about? Okay. Are there any questions by any of my colleagues about the May 4th board meeting agenda?
So, Dr. Burke, I'd just like to point out that the issue of the facility-based mobile source measures is one that was postponed from originally March, and we also postponed it from April to address those issues. So hopefully we can address those issues at the May board meeting.
All right. Do we have any board member compensation packages this morning?
Yes. Supervisor Solis is having her consultant, a new consultant. Her previous consultant is moving out of the country, and her packet is now provided to you for your consideration.
Okay. If I get a motion on that, I'd appreciate it.
Move approval.
Second. I'll second it.
Okay, would the clerk call the roll?
Mayor Benoit?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell?
Yes.
Dr. Parker?
Aye.
Dr. Burke?
Aye. Excuse me.
Motion passes 6-0.
Ron, I want you to know that they're trying to throw you under the bus on this audio thing here this morning. So they're trying to say it's a lack of bandwidth. I find that very hard to believe, since we've done this for years and not had this problem before with the audio. So you may want to look into that.
We'll get to the bottom of it.
You're up for item number 6?
Yes. Good morning, Dr. Burke, members of the committee, Ron Moskowitz, ADO of Information Management. I'm happy to report that our IM projects are moving right along. We've officially completed the website project and will be continuing to monitor and update regularly. Our EGIS project is moving ahead of schedule, and we have completed 7 of the 9 milestones for this fiscal year. The remaining 2 are scheduled to be completed by the end of next month. Our spray booth web application is scheduled to go live within 2 weeks, and our gas station soon after within 4 weeks. Everything else is going well, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Do we have any questions on this?
Nope.
Hearing none, we'll move on to item number 7.
Good morning, Dr. Burke, members of the committee. This is Sujata Jain, Assistant DEO of Finance. This action is to release RFPs and RFQs for May. The RFP is for guard services and RFQ is for janitorial products. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
None here.
Do we need a motion on this?
No.
No.
Okay. Okay, item number, I thought we just did that. Item number 8 is back to
This is the
board
full one.
member compensation.
Are we good?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Item number 8.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Burke. This is Sujata again. This item is, this action is to approve board member assistant and board member consultants compensation for fiscal year 18-19. It is based on the assignment of points for the admin code 112. I'd be happy to answer any questions, Dr. Burke.
Who is it?
Me, Dr. Burke.
Who is it?
Sujata.
Sujata.
Sujata Jain, Dr. Burke. Stand up, Sujata. Take a bow.
Dr. Burke, it's me.
No. I know who you are, and I know who you're. I was asking who is the person we're adjusting.
Not adjusting,
No, it's
Dr.
just the
Burke.
schedule.
This is the budget for all of the board consultants and assistants for 2018-19.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I knew exactly who you were.
Sorry, Dr. Burke.
So,
Say sorry.
may we get a motion on 8?
Move approval.
Second.
Would the clerk call the roll?
Mayor Benoit,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell,
Yes.
Dr. Burke.
Yeah.
Motion passes 3-0.
Okay. Ron, you're back up to bat.
Thank you. Good morning, Dr. Burke, members of the committee. This action is to execute one software development contract previously approved by the governing board and amend 2 other contracts also previously approved by the governing board in order to support our software development and maintenance efforts. The funds are available within our budget, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions for Ron? Hearing none, I accept a motion.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Would the clerk call the roll?
Mayor Benoit,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell,
Yes.
Dr. Park, Dr.
Yeah.
Burke.
Yes. I'll vote for him too. He said yes and I said yes. How's that?
Motion passes 3-0.
Okay, item number 10. John, I've been waiting for this all week.
It's very exciting, Dr. Burke. John O'Vera, Assistant Deputy Executive Officer for Administrative and Human Resources. The next 2 items relate to building infrastructure projects. Item 10 is to authorize the purchase of new carpet for the 3rd and 4th floors of the building. The carpet on those floors is from the original 1991 construction. The pricing that we've obtained is through a cooperative purchase agreement through the state of California. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Is this the same color carpet as we have?
No way, Dr. Burke. No, we found a different carpet. We gave it to the DEOs on the floors, and we got approval from everybody. It's going to be nice.
Do you have a sample here?
I didn't bring it.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
In the 26 years I've been here, probably the second or third thing that I've had the most complaints about was the choice of carpet last time.
I think you're going to like this
Now,
one.
Dr. Wallerstein chose that color. He didn't tell anybody he was colorblind. So, John, if this color comes, you better get someone who's going to back you up on this choice of color here.
I know, Dr. Burke. It's a nice neutral gray. I think it's going to be good. So.
Okay. We'll accept a motion on John's choice of color carpet.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Will the clerk call the roll?
Mayor Benoit,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem
Yes.
Mitchell, Dr. Burke,
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Okay, John, you're up again.
Item 11 is for the purchase of new temperature control valves to increase the efficiency of our HVAC system, which will result in energy savings. And this is before the board because the funds come out of the district's Building Infrastructure Improvement Fund. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I'll move approval.
Okay, do we have a second?
Excuse me.
Do we have a second?
Second?
Okay, would the clerk call the roll?
Mayor Benoit,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell,
Yes.
Dr. Parker,
Yes.
Dr. Burke.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Okay, Mr. Atwood?
Dr. Lowe, item
Jason
number
Lowe.
12.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jason, didn't mean to skip over you.
Good morning, Dr. Burke, members of the committee. The action is to recognize and appropriate around $686,000 from US EPA and CAPCOA to support the PM 2.5 program. It also is to appropriate about $178,000 to support the PAMS program. In addition, it is to appropriate funds from MATES and also the CARB Subvention Fund to purchase an ammonia monitor. And lastly is to reallocate money for data visualization software license purchasing. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions by any of my colleagues?
None here.
None here.
Oh, I don't hear any, so
Move approval.
I'll accept the motion on Mr. Lowe. Oh, Mr. Lowe's item.
Move approval.
I'll second.
Would the clerk call the roll?
Mayor Benoit,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell,
Yes.
Dr. Parker, Dr.
Doc-
Parker.
I said yes. It's, our screen and voice is freezing here.
She can't hear you, obviously.
Can you hear? I s-
Yes, we did hear that.
We got you.
Can you guys hear us at all?
Yes.
Yes. We heard
Okay,
Dr.
Parker said yes, and I said yes.
Okay.
Motion passes 4-0.
Maybe we don't want to remove.
Item number 14.
13. 13.
What happened to 13?
We're ready.
Bay was
Sam is
testing
here.
you.
Lucky number.
Isn't it Sam's item number 13?
Yes, sir.
Ready, Dr. Burke, when you are.
Okay, we can't, it's so screwed up here, we can't see or hear anything. The screen's frozen, the sound goes in and out, we'll get it straightened out, but I just hope we can get through the interviews.
It's right here.
Mr. Atwood?
Good morning, Dr. Burke and committee members. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, thank you. The purpose of this item is to lay the foundation for the upcoming Check Before You Burn outreach campaign, which starts, the season itself starts on November 1st. There are two parts to this item. The first is to modify a contract with Westbound Communications in an amount of $246,000 to plan and execute a comprehensive media, advertising, and public relations campaign to promote Check Before You Burn. Part 2 proposes to amend a purchase order with Google for up to $250,000, also to promote Check Before You Burn, using YouTube and a Google AdWords campaign. Staff recommends approval, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Colleagues, I'll accept the motion.
I'll move approval of this item.
Second?
Second, clerk call the roll.
Mayor Benoit,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell,
Yes.
Dr. Parker,
Yes.
Dr. Burke.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Item number 14.
Yes, Dr. Burke. Bay Gilchrist General Counsel. This action is to appropriate $450,000 from the undesignated unassigned fund balance for legal's fiscal year 2017-18 budget and to execute contracts with two qualified counsel approved by the board and for specialized legal counsel and services for environmental litigation. Unless there's any other questions, I don't have any further to add right now.
I'll move approval.
We have testimony from the public there? No?
No, I don't see any.
Okay. Any questions by my colleagues? No questions, then I'll accept a motion.
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Would the clerk call the roll?
Mayor Benoit,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell,
Aye.
Dr. Parker,
Aye.
Dr. Burke.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Item number 15.
Bay Gilchrist again, Dr. Burke. This is to execute a service agreement with Thomson Reuters West to provide AQMD with online legal research and print libraries that will expire, access to them June 30th of this year. It's to execute a sole source contract for a new 3-year agreement with them in an amount not to exceed $92,350 in fiscal year 2018-19, $95,150 in fiscal year 2019-20, and $98,100 in fiscal year 2020 to 2021, for a total amount of $285,600 for the 3-year period. If there's any questions, please let me know.
Are there any questions by the board members?
None here, and I'll move.
Any
approval.
testimony from the public?
Nope.
Hearing none, I will accept a motion on this item.
Move approval.
Second.
The clerk call the roll.
Mayor Benoit,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell,
Yes.
Dr. Parker,
Yes.
Dr. Burke.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Okay. Item 16, the appointment of hearing board members.
Good morning, Chairman Burke and committee members. My name is Denise Garzaro, the clerk of the boards. The current terms of office for the attorney and engineer hearing board members and their alternates will end on June 30th. An advisory committee appointed pursuant to state statute reviewed 86 resumes. They interviewed 9 candidates and then recommended the top 3 attorney candidates and top 4 engineer candidates for interview and a final recommendation by the administrative committee. I have provided the committee members with the copies of the candidates' resumes and interview questions. I would just like to note that the first engineer member candidate listed, Ms. Tracy Minimead, has subsequently withdrawn from consideration. So you have 3 candidates for engineer that you'll be interviewing today, one of which, Mohan Balagopalan, who was ranked 3rd by the advisory committee, had an out-of-state commitment, and he is joining by telephone today. In preparation for the interviews, would the committee members like to decide who will be asking which questions?
I'll ask number 1.
I'll ask number 2.
Okay. If it pleases the committee, and unless there are any other questions by committee members at this time, we will start with the candidates for attorney member and alternate.
Excuse me, Dr. Burke, before we go that, could we clarify, are we going to be selecting a recommended recommended hearing board member and a recommended alternate for each position?
Correct.
All right, so you got that?
You know, I have a real question about that. Because this kind of goes, and I promised myself I wasn't going to talk today, because talking really makes me not feel good, but can the clerk tell me how many times in the last 4 years that alternates were used on the hearing board?
It depends on the caseload, but typically, more recently in the last year, they may serve 2 to 3 times a year. It really depends on, the member that they're serving for. If they have pre-planned, it's typically for pre-planned absences, pre-planned vacations, that sort of thing.
Now, let's make sure I'm right on this. What you're saying is that out of the last year, out of the 5 board members, only 3 alternates were used three different times?
No, each of the alternates may serve 2 to 3 times in a year.
Then what you're saying is all 5 we had 15 alternate days?
We did not last year. That's a typical year. The caseload was a bit, has been lighter, and so there hasn't been the need to have someone in, or we didn't get enough advance notice to bring their alternate in if there was an absence.
This is one of my 412 pet peeves with the hearing board. We go through this process of selecting alternates. Those people we select, I think, have a right to expect that they'll be utilized in some meaningful manner, and it just doesn't happen. What happens is the hearing board cancels their meeting rather than use the alternates. So I don't, I don't know. First of all, I should probably ask Chief Legal Counsel, do we have the authority to muck with this at all?
Dr. Burke, that's what we're looking at right now. We're looking at that. We're looking into that issue right now.
Okay, well, let me now hold up the selection process by doing this. So can we move on with the interview process, and then we'll decide, I assume that we will appoint an alternate and a hearing board officer today from each of these 2 categories.
First is Julie Prusek, the incumbent attorney member and current chair of the hearing board, ranked number 1 by the advisory committee. Prior to being appointed to the board in 2009, Ms. Prusek worked for 10 years as a litigating attorney, most recently as the director of Southern California Clean Air Program at the NRDC. Ms. Prusek has indicated an interest in serving in the regular member position only.
Ready for question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. And you currently serve on the hearing board, is that right?
I do. I have served in the hearing board for almost the last 9 years.
The last 9 years, okay. Are you chair? Did I hear that correctly? Are you chairing the hearing board at the present time?
Yes, I am currently serving as the chair of the hearing board. I have been for almost the last year.
Okay. Could you describe your training and explain how your training has prepared you for this job?
Absolutely. First of all, I would start with the fact that I have been a hearing board member for the last almost 9 years. And so I have very relevant experience both working on it and serving as chair over the last year. And in that time, I believe that I have demonstrated myself by earning the respect of my fellow board members and being voted as chair, earning the respect of district staff and district council, and of the community who have made comments as to how I have upheld the district rules and regulations and been very strong in protecting communities. Before that, even before serving for the years that I have served, I also had, I think, excellent experience designed for this hearing board. So I have 10 years of actual litigating experience, and most of that, 7 of those years, were spent as senior counsel at the Natural Resources Defense Council, working in clean air and air quality. And as the final year of that, I was actually director of the South Coast of the Southern California Air program at the NRDC. And in that time, not only did I work in air quality, but I also worked significantly before this district. So I sat on working groups, rulemaking groups. I advocated for rules before the governing board on many, many occasions. We intervened on behalf of the district to support the fleet rules all the way up to the United States Supreme Court and back on remand. And so I have a real working experience of how rules are made, why they're made, and the entire process. And then to cap that off, I also worked for a couple of years as a consultant to Dr. Joseph Liu. And in that capacity, I really understood how the governing board works. So sort of putting the period or exclamation point on the end. And so really understanding how the district works, how rules are made, why they're made. And I found that has come in very, very useful in my work.
So do you presently have a practice? I have your address in Redondo Beach. Are you presently have a practice in Redondo Beach?
No, I do not.
Okay.
Air quality, I've devoted my life, my career to air quality. I could not have a practice and also sit on the hearing board. There would be conflicts, but also as chair especially, I find it takes all of my time to do the work that I do. As chair, there's an extra day, plus when there are no hearings, I'm available and do ex parte hearings. I'll also, if there are questions that come up, I also help, to administratively make sure that the workings of the board are working as they should be. So I have nothing else. This is my sole focus and sole profession, and I love it that way. I like to give my 100% to everything I do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, go ahead.
The hearing board must often balance the interests of community and regulated business. What do you see as an appropriate balance, and why are you the best person to assist the hearing board with achieving this balance?
Yeah, that's a good question, because obviously when you look at my background, you see a lot of nonprofit working for the community. And of course, I think the most important role of all of the board members is to make sure that the district rules and regulations are upheld and we keep clean air in the district, and that means protecting communities. However, I do believe that there is that balance that does need to be made. It's extremely important. And so I approach this by essentially having an unbiased look at every single case that comes before me. So I'll start with a clean slate. I'll read the petition and I will come up with questions that I have. But I know that there are certain findings that I'm mandated by law to make. So if I have a variance request, there are 6 findings that I need to make. I need to approach them consistently in every single case. And I believe that by having that consistency, that's how I'm most unbiased. That's how I'm making sure that that attorneys or parties that come before us, facilities, know what to expect, know what standards they have to meet in order for me to make the findings. And then I always leave an open mind to listen to my fellow board members. It's very important. I respect my fellow board members. They all have a particular expertise. sometimes that I might not have the breadth of expertise. For example, the engineer member may have more expertise. By listening, and oftentimes, I wouldn't say often, but it has definitely been the case where I've come into deliberations with one outcome in mind, and I have been persuaded by listening to my fellow board members take the evidence and apply it in a way that's different than I have envisioned. Also, you have to kind of dig a little bit deeper because it's in my further past, but I do have a real understanding of how businesses work because I did major in business and accounting, and I worked for 2 years as a public accountant. And so I really do bring that also. I brought that initially into my practice of law before I became really focused on environmental. So I bring that in with me as well.
Very good.
Thank you. Anything else? We've completed our questions
you know,
here.
when I retired, I didn't know that it meant that it was going to provide me with all this time to watch the AQMD hearing board on webcast. But I'm amazed at the amount of time I do spend watching it. And I have to say that, Julie, I think that in the last year, you've done a very, very good job at chairing the hearing board. I have my issues of expediting and the process and making sure that the public is being served in that process. I've discussed that with you, and I would hope that if you are reappointed, that you would take that to heart, because with our chief legal counsel in the room, I'm saying this very directly, whether it's the AQMD legal team or the hearing board, I think that the public interest is served by giving expeditious attention to these issues and not letting them become protracted over long periods of time. And I think you've done a good job of that, and I think you're to be commended on that.
Thank you, Chairman Burke. And I would just add to that, I appreciate that, and I thank you for that. And I would just say that I agree 100%. And the cases that I feel most have to be expedited and that I always keep in mind are those where you have excess emissions, and in particular when we're talking about lead emissions or hexavalent chromium emissions or things like that, and in particular when we're talking about sensitive receptors nearby. So I share that, and I agree 100%.
Thank you. Any further questions by my colleagues?
None here.
None here. Yeah.
Hearing none. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Next is the incumbent attorney alternate, Douglas Loughran, ranked number 2 by the committee. Mr. Loughran is a practicing attorney for 45 years, the past 27 of which have been in private practice. And specializing in complicated civil litigation and white-collar criminal defense. Mr. Loughran is seeking the alternate member position only.
Go ahead.
Good morning.
Don't know where to look.
Yeah, we're board members too. We have 2 on video who are board members.
So I look in the center?
And that's our attorney, so you can look anywhere you'd like. Thank you for coming in.
Of course.
And I'm going to ask about your legal training, explain how your training has helped you prepare for this job and what your experience has been on this board. So.
Okay. My legal training was at USC.
Yay.
What's that?
Yay.
Graduated from there in 19, whatever it was, many years ago. Too many years to remember.
We have that information.
After that, I went into the Army as a JAG attorney and was a JAG attorney for 7 years back east and in Korea. Tried lots of cases. My background is litigation, so I tried lots and lots of cases of every type, generally emphasizing complicated cases. In Korea, I emphasized supply diversion cases. That was a huge problem, when I was there. After there, I went into the United States Attorney's Office as a federal prosecutor for 7 years. And there I specialized in white-collar criminal defense and was head of the labor corruption section. But when I was there, when you're a federal prosecutor, you do a little bit of everything. So I handled everything from bank robbery cases to fraud cases. One technical case that I had involved illegal CB amplifiers. So I had to be involved very much in understanding the technology and the equipment. And I remember in court, they brought in all of these pieces of equipment, and they were trying to argue that it didn't exceed the maximum limits, and of course it did. So there was a conviction. So that's a technical case which shows the type of facility I have with technical matters. After that, I went and worked with Coldwell Banker Commercial, which is now CBRE Group, which is now the global leader in real estate services, commercial real estate services. And there I did all sorts of litigation, learned civil litigation, because before that it was primarily criminal. And again, emphasis on complicated cases, detail, and so forth. My whole attitude about litigation is you have to have a bathtub mentality. And what happens is, you have a case, you gather the facts, you gather the law, you get up to speed, and then when you're done, you pull the plug, and you go on to the next one. And sometimes you have 2 or 3, 10 bathtubs going at the same time. But it's just the way I work and the way I think that it requires it. In private practice, the very first case I had involved contaminated soil, and in that case we had a wonderful couple who wanted to retire, and they bought a gas station, and this is about 25, 26 years ago. And they bought the gas station thinking this would be a great investment for their future, but as you might imagine, there was a little problem, and it was called leaking tanks. So we got involved in that case, and I got an injunction against the foreclosure. They had a choice, and their choice was, we can either comply with the regulators and remove the tanks, or we can pay on the note to the seller. And they decided to be good citizens and take care of their problem, but then the former owner sued them, and tried to foreclose against them. So we stopped that. But in the process, I got involved with the underground storage tank program, which was just starting. And so I got very involved with that program, ultimately got them, a lot of money to fix the problem and resolve it. So those are some of the types of things I've been involved in. More currently, I've been involved in a case involving a Superfund issue down in the South Bay. So those are the types of things from a legal standpoint that I have. And then, of course, I've been on the board as an alternate member for almost 6 years, hearing lots and lots of cases and trying to be involved and helpful every way I can. My only criticism is that Julie's never gone. Ms. Prusak is never gone. So last year I sat one time, and it's frustrating when you're trying to be as proficient as I try to be at whatever I do. So it's hard to be proficient when you sit one day a year. And I was going back in preparation for day thinking, the first term I sat 10 days. So maybe I heard 25 cases. I don't know what it was. That was the first 3 years. This term, up to now, I've sat 3 days. So it's like once a year. And again, Julie's phenomenal. Ms. Prusak's phenomenal. And unfortunately, we take vacations at the same time at Thanksgiving. So, but I think the world of her and what she does, and I don't begrudge that. But I don't sit as much as I would like, but I'm here, So I'm available to step in and lend an ear or help any way I can. And I try to get to the training sessions, which are great, and I think that's a wonderful program that they do. And I encouraged that when I first sat, because there weren't many training programs. It was like you were oriented, and then you're supposed to know it automatically. Well, that isn't the way life works. So it's good to be refreshed, periodically. And I go to the general meetings as much as I can and try to contribute.
Very
Okay,
good.
thank you.
The hearing board must often balance interests of the community and regulated business. What do you see as an appropriate balance, and why are you the best person to assist the hearing board in finding that balance?
Both sides are so important, I've got grandkids now, and I've got children who live in this area, and obviously I want them to have a clean, healthful environment where they can breathe. At the same time, I want them to have jobs. So you've got the balance, you've got the tension, you've got the conflict, and you really just have to pay attention on each case as to what's going on. You've got to make sure the elements are there, and you've got to be sensitive to the fact that, you could put somebody out of business too. So you have to be mindful about what you're doing and the consequences to what you do. And I know that with respect to some of the cases involving small mom and pops, the board is real concerned about them, because you've got to be concerned about them because they maybe didn't know the rules as much, maybe they're at great financial risk, and in terms of how we deal with them, in terms of questioning and what we require them, it isn't that the standards any less, but I think we're more understanding perhaps, and if they need some help on questioning or getting the information out in terms of the elements, we'd help them. As far as, why I think I'm the best for it, well, A, I enjoy public service. B, I enjoy the collegiality of the board. I think it's really neat to be a member of a board which has a doctor, a lawyer, 2 public members, and an engineer. It's fun. I mean, I'm a sole practitioner, and so it's kind of fun to be in that type of an environment. And I think I've contributed a lot, and I hope to continue to contribute, and I enjoy the people.
Very good.
Dr. Burke, anything else?
How many times did you get to serve in the past year?
Once.
Once. Okay. Well, you remind me of one of our colleagues on the board, Board Member Cacchiotti. I think you have the same skill set that he has, and the same intense energy to doing the job. So I truly hope, I don't want anything to happen to Julie if Julie gets reappointed, but I hope you get a chance to serve more in your coming term if you should be reappointed.
Thank you very much.
If none of my colleagues has any further questions, we'll let him go.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for
It
coming.
was a pleasure being here. We're going that way.
Oh, this is restart. Good.
Final attorney candidate, Philip J. He is ranked number 3 by the advisory committee. Mr. J has practiced law in California for 38 years, including serving as chief counsel for the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning on video conference.
Morning.
Morning.
Morning. So you were, so I was interested that you were chief counsel for San Joaquin Valley. And my question is, describe your legal training and how that prepared you for this job.
Well, I've been practicing government and environmental law for almost 40 years. Started off in county counsel's offices in Madera County and Fresno County. My stint at Fresno County, toward the end, we created the San Joaquin Valley Unified Air Pollution Control District, and my job was at first to make that not happen because of the politics of it. And then once the state of California said it's going to happen, my job was to do the legal work to make it happen. And we took 8 county air pollution control districts and put them into one central agency with centralized staff, rulemaking, et cetera, in a very conservative, politically conservative region. Nobody wanted to do it. Became somewhat of a success story. After a year of still representing them through Fresno County, they asked me to come on full time, and I did that for, I don't know, something close to 18 years. And some of you, if you're old enough like me to remember in the old days, there wasn't a lot of law on air pollution. You kind of made it up as you went along. So we made up a lot of stuff, and I handled a lot of very cutting-edge cases through my career. Everything from defending the first regulations, air pollution regulations that control land development, subdivisions, shopping centers, things like what you're dealing with here, the port. Got sued by industry, went up to the Ninth Circuit, petitioned to the Supreme Court, successfully defended that. There were a lot of allegations of takings of property and illegal use of power. I was counsel for the first case where the rules challenged were regulation of agricultural operations. We call them factory farms, large dairies, et cetera. I mean, in the old days, you never thought a farm would get an air pollution permit. Well, now it's a way of life up there. I defended those in court. I assume you have my resume. I have a list of cases anywhere from, major multi-million-dollar settlements against big polluters, refineries, manufacturers, to the ridiculous cases. I had an illegal burning case one time against the Ku Klux Klan up in Modesto, which was kind of interesting. I was on their list for a little while. And everything.
What did they burn?
Take a guess. A cross. And of course, they were claiming it was all
just
political.
so long as there was nobody on it.
Nobody on it. But I learned a lot. As a matter of fact, when they do that back east, they have a natural gas-fired cross, believe it or not, when they do that. But these guys like the oil-soaked burlap, and all that. So, but I've probably handled one of any kind of case you can think of, anything from representing judges and district attorneys. I've represented. We had 3 hearing boards in the San Joaquin Valley. I probably attended hundreds of meetings. We used to attend them all individually. We got the law changed so you can do what you're doing here to get the video conferencing to where you can actually create a quorum through video conferencing, which the Brown Act in the past never allowed you to do. So I have a lot of hearing board experience. A little bit different model than what you use here. Here the hearings tend to be a little more adversarial, a little more formal. Up in the valley, in my experience, and with other hearing boards, it tends to be more of what I call a planning commission model. It's still quasi-judicial. You're still adjudicating facts, but the district counsel's office would sit with the hearing board and advise them. The attorney member was basically a voting member, but not giving legal advice or representing the district in any way. Our theory always was, we want hearing boards to have good legal representation so they don't get off on tangents that, you may have a hearing board attorney member who knows a lot about air pollution, but a lot of times you get just like a business attorney on there, and they can get themselves in a little bit of trouble at times. So we always made sure to have legal representation for the hearing board separate from the attorney member. So that's pretty much it. I think I have the qualifications to do the job. I have noticed as far as, a little bit of differences, that there'll be a little bit of getting up to speed. One thing I find interesting about the hearing board here is it's not, maybe adversarial isn't the right word, but a lot of hearings take much longer than they need to take. I realize that you have to make a record, you have to make all the findings that the law requires. You have to be aware that the Air Resources Board could, once in a blue moon, overrule a variance, but On the other side, to me, when the parties come in and the district's in agreement and the source is in agreement and there's no public opposition, there's no reason for a hearing to take as long as some of them take. I watched one on video just the other day with a source that I'd had many dealings with up in the valley. Totally uncontested matter. Everybody's in agreement, and the hearing took, I don't know, 2 hours plus. A hearing like that up in the valley would have been 15 minutes. There's no reason for it to take so long. The record, you need to make the record, but long doesn't necessarily make a better record. So those are the kinds of things, if chosen, I would have, I'm not going to say trouble with, but my hope would be that some of the stuff could be sped up.
Very good.
Especially when you're paying some lawyer for the source $6.50 an hour, as I'm learning. Lawyers are very expensive in the private sector.
We just approved some extra attorney help for Bay, so yeah, we know. $450,000 a day. Just a quick question here. The hearing board must often balance interests of the community and regulated businesses. What do you see as an appropriate balance, and why are you the best person to assist the hearing board in this kind of balance?
Well, I've been at this for 40 years, and I've probably represented hundreds of elected officials and been involved with a lot of community groups. And the role, to me, of the hearing board is, first of all, you have to be aware of politics and all these conflicting demands, but you have to be apolitical, and you sit as a judge on the hearing board. I would not want to go in to a judge and appear before them and have them start rewriting my air pollution permit during a hearing. I mean, to me, the job is to be neutral. You hear the facts on both sides, and you don't advocate for any side. You have to be neutral, and you have to realize there's a line there between asking questions and advocating. And I know sometimes it's hard. I've had big hearings where, there's hundreds of neighbors in the room and, they want blood. And you have a source, a business. Last time I looked, the role of the hearing board is not to put people out of business, but to make them comply in fairness to the people who do comply. So it's a fine line, but it's a pretty dark line to me. It's like you don't step over that boundary between asking questions and judging the facts to advocating. So my philosophy would be just like any judge. Hear the facts and stay neutral. I don't care what your politics are or your beliefs. They have no place if you're sitting on the hearing board.
Very good.
Let me ask just one question. Are you seeking the permanent position or the alternate position?
I put in for both. Either one would be fine. I've spent most of my career in public service, and even though I've gone over to the dark side the last 7 years or so, I still feel I'd like the ability to give back and help out. And it's not about the money or anything like that. I just think it's a good thing to do.
Very good. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your interview. Are there any other questions by any of my colleagues?
I have none.
Nope.
Okay, then why don't we let him go, and we can let me ask the chief counsel, do we make this personnel decision in public, or is this a closed session decision?
Historically, Mr. Chair, we've always done it in public like this. In the future, if you would like, we could reconsider that, but that's how we've always done it historically.
No, I don't have any problem.
And it's not noticed
either way
for closed session. So And I have an answer to your question.
That concludes our list of candidates for the legal position. So why don't we go ahead and make a decision on that, and then we'll take up the engineering side.
Dr. Burke,
I'm
I have
open
an
to any
answer
suggestions.
to your question about whether we needed to, whether the board, the committee needed to make a recommendation for an alternate. The Health and Safety Code is so clear that the board shall appoint hearing board members, but it says that the board may also appoint an alternate for each member. So that is not a requirement that there is an alternate for each hearing board member. But in light of your statement that you're concerned that the resolution of the hearing board issues are done most expeditiously, I would point out that not having alternates could potentially slow down resolution of hearing board matters for a couple of different reasons. One would be scheduling, and two would be for the resolution.
I agree, Chief Counsel. I agree wholeheartedly. And I brought the point up to make a point so that the whoever is the chair knows that we're watching and that we know that you can move not only with the current board members but also with the alternates, and that was my purpose in that discussion.
Thank you.
Does anyone have a recommendation for the legal counsel of?
Well, I would recommend reappointing. Oh, yeah, please. Sorry.
Oh, public comment.
Public comment, okay. Is there public comment on this? Okay.
Kurt Coleman. I'm here today as an attorney, not representing any specific organization, but I've been appearing before the AQMD hearing board since probably 1992 or so, when I went into private practice. A well-functioning hearing board is really a critical part of the district's compliance program. And I would just like to say that with respect to the attorney member, Julie Prusak has been an exceptional hearing board member. When she was just the vice chair, now she's the chair, but she has done, I always have a little trepidation when someone comes in from an environmental group as to, are they going to be fair? Are they going to be leaning one way or the other? But she really is fair, gives everyone the opportunity to present their case fairly, considers the evidence carefully, and she's voted against me, but she's also voted, against my client, but voted for me. But I've always felt that I've gotten a fair hearing before her. So I would just, I don't want to, I'm agnostic on the other two because I haven't obviously had the opportunity to appear before them that I can recall, but I can vouch for Ms. Prusak's fairness and willingness to consider all sides and conduct a hearing expeditiously and fairly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? All right, that's it.
And I would recommend, my opinion on this would be to reappoint Ms. Prusak to the hearing board. I think she's well qualified. She's articulate. She interviewed very well. She's got obviously people that appear before her who think she's fair and thorough. And so I would recommend reappointing her. I don't know if Ben wants to agree with me on that.
I agree wholeheartedly with that.
I think that's probably, I can't speak for Clark, but I think that's probably a unanimous choice of the committee. The only trepidation I had with her, I've discussed with her, and that is that we must keep these cases moving because the public is at risk. Every time you slow a case down, the public is the one who suffers. The company doesn't suffer. District doesn't suffer. The public suffers. So I've said that to her now enough. I think she's heard it, and I hope she's heard it, and I'll let Dr. Parker speak for himself.
Well, I too have watched Julie both in person and also by internet, and she seems to be the kind of person that really does strike a balance between environmental law requirements and also those of the public concerns, both from a business standpoint of view and a community standpoint of view. So I would concur with your recommendation, the other members as well.
So will the clerk call the board roll rather on the reappointment of Julie Prosak?
I think we need a motion first.
Oh, I move that we reappoint Ms. Prusak to the hearing board.
Second.
Okay. Would the clerk now call the roll?
Mayor Benoit?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell?
Yes.
Dr. Parker?
Pour water.
Aye.
Dr. Burke?
Yes. Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
How about the alternate?
Okay, now moving on to the next position, the engineering position.
Do you want to do an alternate?
Oh, the alternate. We need to do the alternate.
Yeah.
To be honest, this one really leaves me in a quandary because both of these guys are very qualified.
I would recommend,
We don't have anything.
I think my opinion is reappoint Mr. Loughlin.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Because everything was frozen here. Hello?
We can hear you, Dr. Burke. Can
You
hear
do
us?
hear me?
Yes.
Can you
They
hear
heard
us?
us, but we can't hear you.
Yeah, we can't hear you guys sometime. That's part of the problem.
Maybe she can repeat it. Ms. Mitchell?
Yeah, my opinion is to reappoint Mr. Lufgren. He hasn't had much opportunity to serve, but I think he's well qualified, and that would be my choice.
And I concur with that.
I'm sorry, we just couldn't hear you, Ms. Mitchell. Could you repeat that?
Yes, I move that we reappoint Mr. Lufgren as the alternate.
Okay. Okay, I got it that time. Okay, is that a motion?
Yes, and I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Would the clerk call the roll?
Mayor Benoit?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell?
Yes.
Dr. Parker?
Yes.
Dr. Burke?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Moving on to the engineer member and alternate candidates. First is Edward Camarena, the incumbent engineer member, ranked number 1 by the advisory committee. Mr. Camarena was first appointed to the hearing board in 1994 and served as chair of the board from 1995 to 2017.
Well, come down a little further. Right down here. There you go.
Thank you. Good morning.
Does my colleagues have any questions?
Yes. Mr. Camarena, thank you for coming today and for your service for many years on our hearing board. So if we could go over your previous training and how your training has prepared you for this particular job on the hearing board.
Okay. Well, aside from my degrees, Bachelor in Chemistry and a Master's in Environmental Engineering, and also I've had some training at the National Judicial College in evidence, due process, things of that nature. I don't have a law degree, but I've been told it's kind of dangerous if you know a little bit. Beyond that, I've had many years' experience at the district. I served as an employee at the district for 33 years. And the experience was wide-ranging. first 9 years, and it was before the district was created. I started working for the Orange County Air Pollution Control District, which later became part of this district. Started as a chemist, became the chief chemist, then moved over into engineering, where I had the opportunity to review some of the major issues of the day. Perhaps the biggest one was what became a landmark decision, pitted the Public Utilities Commission against the very small Orange County Air Pollution Control District. It was a jurisdictional dispute with both agencies asserting that they had prominent authority over the issuance of a permit. The permit was denied, and that eventually went to the state Supreme Court to decide whether or not, or who had jurisdiction. And fortunately, the Supreme Court decided we both had jurisdiction. I was involved in the processing of the application. I was involved in the hearings before the Public Utilities Commission, wherein the Edison Company was asserting that tripling the size of the power plant in Huntington Beach was not going to impact air quality. At that time, the air quality standards had first been adopted by the Air Resources Board. This was 1968. I looked at the air quality data that we have, and it just didn't make sense to build two 460 megawatt, I think it was, plants. Ultimately, they didn't build the plants, but there were several benefits. One was that they instead installed some turbines, which were much lower in pollution. During our the hearings with the Public Utilities Commission, while they didn't agree with us about the permit, they did make some concessions to us. One was the installation of continuous monitors throughout the basin, not just in Orange County. These were the first very primitive monitors. Secondly, we learned that the distribution of power was could be changed. The power demand was distributed according to most efficient power plants, which makes sense for Edison. But what we learned was that you could change the distribution a bit to low NOx emissions, and that's what the Public Utilities Commission ordered. And the third benefit, I think, that came out of that was the requirement of low sulfur fuel oil when the power plants needed to burn low sulfur fuel oil throughout the basin, not just in Orange County. So we had some benefits that came out of that. Following that, in addition to my serving as an engineer for the district, I was the deputy executive officer here for this district, and the enforcement division, engineering divisions were part of my responsibility. And I've now been the engineer member of the hearing board for the last almost 24 years.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you.
So being on the hearing board, you also very often have to balance the interests of both the business interest and the community interest. What do you see as an appropriate balance in that regard?
That's a difficult question. The Health and Safety Code sets forth the criteria, the findings that the hearing board has to make in order to grant the variance. Many of them, there's 6 of them. Some of them require quite a bit of judgment. The first one that we spend a lot of time on is reasonable. One of the findings requires that we determine whether or not the taking of property or closing down a particular operation, whether or not it was reasonable for the source to have avoided the situation, the non-compliant situation. Another of the findings requires that we balance the emissions into the atmosphere versus the community. And another requires that we find that the source reduce their emissions to the maximum feasible during the period of the variance. Health and Safety Code also prescribes what we need to look at on the side of the business in terms of the impact on the business versus the impact on the community. To shut down an operation will result in a loss of revenue. And you need to consider that versus their part. Not only is there a revenue loss, but if it's extensive over several months, you might lose some valuable employees. That's a longer-term loss. The third loss is clients or customers of the product or service that is provided. What we hear over and over again is once you don't provide the service you're contracted to provide to a client, customer, you might lose them forever. They'll go someplace else. They don't want to risk coming back to you and maybe again being without the needed product or service because they in turn sell their product or service. There's no bright line. This takes, I think, years of experience, judgment, understanding of how business works, and understanding of the community. I think I bring a particular value, if you will, to the hearing board. I speak the language that is spoken in many EJ communities. I grew up in an EJ community. We were just a few miles downwind of a notorious battery plant. It's now closed. Today, I think it's done, but the soil that accumulated the lead dust from that battery plant in my old neighborhood had to be cleaned up. We lived, well, when the wind was right, we got the stench from the rendering plants. There were days when the visibility was down to a quarter mile because of the aerosols in the air. So I know where the people in the EJ communities have come from. And I also understand the business side. There's no bright line. It's a matter of judgment.
Very good.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
No further questions here.
Do you feel that in the issues that come before the hearing board, that a significant number are caused by engineering problems?
I think a significant number are caused by companies that have not taken care of business, have failed to maintain their equipment, have failed to meet deadlines because they delayed too long in ordering their equipment.
Then I assume if that's the case, as the engineering person on the board, it's your responsibility to pursue those issues, correct?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any other questions by any of my colleagues?
Nope.
None here. Is there any public? Well, that's after this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, right. That's after.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Robert Peace, ranked number 2 by the advisory committee. Mr. Peace retired from the district in 2015 as a program supervisor with 35 years of engineering experience. He has served on the City of Yorba Linda Planning Commission since 2014. Mr. Peace has indicated an interest in serving in the regular member position only.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Fine, thank you. So you're a former employee of this district?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay. So my first question is describe your training and how that has prepared you for this particular job.
Sure. I have a broad understanding of the technical, the air quality, the local government, and the land use issues that comprise most of the matters the hearing board will consider. I have 2 engineering degrees, and I'm a registered professional engineer. I have conducted research on air pollution control technologies, and I've published papers on emission inventory techniques and air pollution control methods. I have, in my 30-plus years at the SCAQMD, I've worked in planning, rule development, permitting, compliance, technology advancement, and small business assistance. I am planning commissioner for the city of Yorba Linda. I understand the need to reach out and involve the community, to act as an ambassador for the city, and to work collegially on a 5-member body. I have a background in public policy and land use issues because of my work on our general plan, our zoning code amendments, permit and variance hearings. So I have a broad umbrella of experience that would be relevant to the hearing board.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No worries. I'm good.
How long have you been on the planning commission?
I've been on 4 years.
4 years, okay.
So the hearing board often has interests of the community and the regulated business as well. And how do you see an appropriate balance there? And why are you the best person to assist the hearing board in this balance?
Well, I see the hearing board as having really 2 broad policy functions. One is to protect air quality, while that balance that you mentioned is considered to ensure that fairness is part of the equation and that other competing interests are part of the equation. I also see the hearing board there to represent the public's interest, to make sure that the public has a venue for input and that their position is considered. In terms of the balance, that's something that I have to do as a planning commissioner, because we're always balancing the needs of the community versus the needs of businesses, especially through the CUP process. But in general, I would look at the particulars of the situation. I don't think you can a priori say that this should be done or that should be done, but it's really a case-by-case basis. And you need to consider the nature of the business, the surrounding community, and what type of emissions we're talking about. Are we talking about criteria pollutants? Are we talking about toxic pollutants? Things like that. So I do see it as a balance, but you really have to do it on a case-by-case basis.
Very good.
Great, thank you.
See if the chair has any questions.
Any further questions? Dr. Burke?
No questions here.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Pease.
Certainly. I mentioned to the mayor that I was applying for this job, and he went ahead and wrote a letter, if I could.
Do we have it? I think we have it.
Oh, you have it? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great.
We do.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have that
Mr.
letter.
Hernandez's letter. Yes, we have it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Parker, Dr.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for the final interview, we have on the telephone Mohan Balagopalan, ranked number 3 by the advisory committee. He retired from the district in 2017 as a senior permitting manager with over 37 years of permitting experience. And he now teaches courses on permitting and air pollution controls. He's currently teaching a course at a state, so that is why he's joining us via telephone today. Ms. Mohan, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Is he going for primary or both?
He's willing to serve with both.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Good morning, Mr. How do you pronounce your name? The last
Mohan.
name.
Just call him Mohan.
You're just Mohan. Good morning, Mohan.
Good morning, Mohan.
So this is Judy Mitchell on the governing board, and I'm going to start off by asking you to tell us about your training and how that has prepared you for this particular position on the hearing board.
Okay. Thank you again for accommodating me on this call. I have a degree in mechanical engineering and a master's degree in business administration. I worked for 32 years at the AQMD, the permitting division. So in the last 4 years as a permitting manager for the mechanical chemical team. And over the course of my 32 years in the district, I've permitted many industrial sources, been out to a lot of the plants to observe the operation and learn. And I also encouraged my staff when I was the manager of the permitting team to go out so they can always learn more and go out and actually see the process and find out all the difficulties the plants have in the day-to-day operation, and that helps us in crafting more representative permit conditions that are relevant to the source. And I also teach a course on air pollution permitting at UC Riverside, and since I retired last year, I've been part of the national group of instructors who are all retired like me, who go around the country on a EPA grant to teach courses on air pollution at different air pollution agencies. I'm currently in Kentucky, just finished my 4 days of training here for the staff, both inspectors and engineers here at the agency. Well, I also was working at the district. I chaired the Toxic Managers Association at CAPCOA, so I have a strong background in health risk assessment and helped to develop all the risk assessment guidelines and spreadsheet tools that are used by the public and the engineers at the agency. And so I have a passion for air quality and interest in learning more about air quality, and so I've taken classes and I've taught classes on modeling, GIS, and so forth to improve my skills and to share the information I have with others.
Very good. This is Mayor Benoit. I have another question for you. The hearing board is often must balance the interests of the community and regulated business. What do you see as an appropriate balance in that regard, and why are you the best person to assist the hearing board in that?
Yeah, I believe strongly in strong manufacturing, industrial base, but in compliance with our rules and regulations. So I have had occasions when we do public notice due to being either the toxic emissions or being close to school, going out to the community to talk to the school concerns parents. And one of the things I do is we go to the facility first, talk to the facility, and a couple of times what I've done is bring the business environmental manager or the production manager to the meeting with the school, and then have an open discussion with the teachers and the students in some cases, and so they can also ask the questions, and I find that works well when both parties are there, and then the facility is willing to do that. So I've always encouraged the engineers to work closely with the facility, and because a lot of times the permit is a negotiated settlement, so as to speak, we negotiate some of the conditions, and so I always felt it was very important to work in partnership, both with the business community and also the affected communities. So when we do public notice, I get a lot of calls from concerned parents because they got the letter which says there's toxic risk or cancer risk, and you have to talk to them and assure them that we're doing that they're in compliance. We wouldn't be issuing a permit if we don't think that they would be in compliance with the district rules and regulations. And in some cases, because of the concern, I've gone back to the facility and say, look, I think you need to do a little bit more to assure the community, or have negotiated with them to do some additional testing before the final permit is issued, so we could get the data in case there's some of concern, and we can communicate that to the public. I also think that the challenge is going to be in the future when with AB 617, with the community monitoring, there's going to be a lot more issues being raised with all the data that's been collected and the concerns now the public will have on the toxic emissions in the community, and my strong background in health risk assessment, I feel will help me as being an effective member of the hearing board, as an engineering manager, an engineer representative of the hearing board, to ask the right questions, to listen both to the business community and to the public, and then ask the right questions, so that and listen to the board fellow board members, so that some of the questions they ask will be like a popcorn. It will elicit some other questions in my mind, and then make the findings, and then make the recommendation based on the 6 findings that is to list in the health and safety code that has to be met.
Very good. One follow-up question. Mohan, I see your business interests here. You're out teaching in Kentucky. What's your plans if you were to be made the primary board member for all of that business interest? And would you still be doing that, or would you?
I got a couple more classes that I'm committed to, but if then I would tell them, give them advance notice that I would just continue that if I'm a full-time member of the board. But if I'm not the alternate, then I will still continue to teach.
Sure. Okay. Any other questions?
No, nothing. Dr. Burke?
Yes.
Any further questions for Mohan?
No. Not from our end here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mohan.
Thank you.
Dr. Parker and I were just discussing that I'm not sure that a job interview should be held by phone. I think if I'm hiring somebody for an almost $100,000 a year job, I think I'd like to see them. So we did it today, but I think in the future, I think if they can't make it, they can't make it. So we now have consideration for, that concludes our interviews,
Public
correct?
comment.
It does conclude our interviews. We have public comment.
Public comment. Curtis
Dr.
Coleman.
Burke, Dr. Parker, Kurt Coleman again as an attorney appearing before the hearing board. What I would like to say on this one is you have 3 extremely well-qualified candidates, as you probably already know from, I've known all of these people for many, many years. I think they're all capable of doing the engineer job well. I will say this for Mr. Camarena. What struck me as I'm sitting here thinking, basically I think the committee rated these candidates correctly, 1, 2, 3. They're very close, but that's the order. And Dr. Burke, you asked Mr. Camarena the question about, isn't it your job to go into the engineering issues and explain, make sure the other hearing board members who aren't engineers know what the problems are and why that's a problem and what potential solutions are and whether he agrees or disagrees with the expert witness for the petitioner or the district. And that's absolutely one of the big jobs. And the thing about Mr. Camarena, he's like the farmer's insurance guy. We've seen it, we've covered it. I mean, in all those years, he's seen just about everything and knows how to, what the problems are, how to explain it. And do I think Robert Pease can do that? Of course he could. And Mohan, I'm sure, could do that as well. But it's just, I think that's the one thing that gives Mr. Camarena a little bit of a leg up on this. That's all I wanted to say.
The reason I asked that question was for the last 15 years that I've been watching the hearing board, I've never heard him ask one engineering question. I'm not interested in a debate.
Yeah. Okay.
That's just my statement.
All right. Has not been my experience is all I can say.
Yeah, right. Well, that's my experience. So,
We have another public comment.
We have another public comment, Dr. Burke.
Yes.
Good morning, Dr. Burke. I'm Bill Lamar, Executive Director of the California Small Business Alliance. And I guess unlike Kurt, there is unfortunately one candidate on this list that I certainly wouldn't support, and I'm not going to mention who it is. But that
makes it hard for us to know.
I know.
Maybe tell us who you do support.
Well, I did want to comment on Ed Camarena. I've known him for close to 30 years, most as a senior member of the AQMD staff and as a hearing board engineer, but I've also had the pleasure of serving with him on the Budget Advisory Committee for, gosh, I don't know how many years I've been on that. And he's always, to me, he's typified what a senior official of an agency like this should represent. Not only is he aware of the mission of the agency, but he's also been sensitive to business. I guess one of the things that I've admired about Ed is that over the years on the hearing board, he's been extremely aware of the importance of businesses in the community, and I know he's made me aware of anomalies or trends in people coming to the hearing board, where he's noticed either anomalies or trends where there is a misunderstanding or inattention to either maintenance or housekeeping or something other that causes them to run afoul of a rule. And he's notified me or made me aware of that by industry sector, auto body repair shops, dry cleaners, what have you. And it's been extremely helpful because I, in turn, have been able to talk to the leadership of these associations, and hopefully we've been able to keep some people away from the hearing board. It's very expensive, certainly for small businesses, and it's not something that is a viable option to many of them because of the cost. So he does bring a unique expertise and awareness to this, and we would certainly support his reappointment.
Thank you, Bill. Is there anyone else? No other public comment here, Dr. Burke.
Okay, my problem is that I'm always too direct, I know. But I'm going to say what's on my mind, and you can either react or not react. The reason that I have spent the last 3 years trying to improve what I felt was the lack of responsiveness of the hearing board to the public was, I felt that the leadership of Mr. Camarena was lacking. Okay? No question, he's a nice guy, and I like him, and all that. And for 15 years, Dr. Wallerstein says, no, don't, leave him alone. Leave him alone. He understands. But when Barry left, I intensified my observations. And so I didn't want it to be me. I didn't want it to be just maybe I have a quirk and maybe there's something that he did that subconsciously got me. So that's why I asked our chief legal counsel to go out and hire an expert to evaluate the performance of the hearing board itself and specifically the board members. He did. We made significant changes. I don't think that Mr. Camarena has adjusted to those changes, and I think it's time for a change. So that's just my personal opinion. I'm at the will of the admin committee, but I definitely am not supporting his reappointment.
If I
I could ask the clerk, so that my understanding is Robert only wanted to be primary and Mohan was willing to do both?
Correct.
And Tracy has withdrawn?
Yes, the other candidate was willing to be an alternate. That's why the committee pushed her forward. But Mr. Camarena is willing to serve in either capacity.
So Mr. Camarena would be the alternate?
It could be.
He could be the alternate.
Right.
Yes.
So maybe I'd bring forward a suggestion, maybe Robert is the primary and Camarena is the alternate?
I wonder about Robert's experience. Well, and it's too bad Mohan wasn't here, but maybe, I don't know, their staff can help explaining that experience, because Mohan was a head of permit issuance, right? And Robert was more of a program supervisor. I don't know how, comparing those two experience categories, what would be better for the board? I mean, maybe somebody can help me with that.
Could I ask Dr. Tisopoulos to maybe address that? I think,
yeah. Actually, I work with both individuals, and Mohan served as a manager, as an engineering manager in charge of 2 permitting teams for a fairly long time, and Mr. Pease served as a program supervisor, first in engineering division and then in the plan and rule development division. They are both, well qualified engineering principles wise, and I don't know whether you have any specific questions that you would like me to address.
I think just the comparison of those two sort of lines of experience, they're comparable, is what I think you're telling me, is that whether you're program supervisor or manager of permit issuance, they're similar levels of experience.
Right. Even though there are a lot of similarities in the experience, I would say probably Mohan, having served a lot longer time as a manager in the associated with 2 permitting units, may perhaps bring a lot more relevant experience to the task at hand.
I did think he was a stronger candidate in the interview too. It's just obviously it would be nice to have him here.
Yeah, I thought he, in my opinion, was a stronger candidate through the interview, but it is, it is hard to judge somebody when they're not in front of you. I mean, it's easier, especially for an important interview, as Dr. Burke mentioned, to have somebody in front of you. But the other factor is that Mr. Camarena was rated #1 by the interview committee. I thought he also interviewed well. The one apprehension and we have good recommendations for him from people who appear before him as well. And he served in this position for a long time, but sometimes that can be a detriment. You've been in it for so long that you may not be bringing fresh eyes to the process. So that's sort of another factor that I look at as I'm trying to make a decision here. But one thing that impressed me about Mohan was his knowledge of AB 617, what we were going to have to do with that. So that impressed me. I mean, just to put it out there, I was impressed with that.
One is continuing education and continuing the teaching.
Yeah, right. So, but he's rated 3rd by our advisory committee, so you've got these little competing things going on. So anyway, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, those are all kind of the thoughts I'm going through as I weigh this.
I have similar thoughts, and I think that's why when I was looking at the list, and that's why Robert sort of popped up first. But I agree with you that I think Mohan actually presented better, and I think has a bit more depth of knowledge on some of this stuff. So I'll withdraw my first suggestion. So maybe my suggestion now would be Mohan primary and Edward Cabrera for second.
I would support that. I mean,
sure.
I just think, it's too bad Mohan wasn't here, but everybody knows him, and we don't know him. Because we don't work with him directly, but he seems to be supported by, some of the people here who worked with him, and I thought he interviewed better, even though he wasn't even here, that's kind of a strong statement
That's
right
true.
there.
That's true.
So I would be supportive of putting Mohan in the hearing board and Mr. Camarino as the alternate. I'll move that. I'll make that motion.
Form of a motion. I take that in the form of a motion.
Yes, I make that motion.
I'll second.
Would the clerk call the roll?
Mayor Benoit?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell?
Aye.
Dr. Parker?
Aye.
Dr. Burke?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
All right.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
One aye.
Are we done? Is that it for today? No,
One
there's
more.
something
All right.
else.
Item number 17, Dr. Burke, with Derek doing the presentation.
The motion is required. We don't need a presentation. We've been here long enough. Derek?
Thank you.
If I can get a motion on item 17?
On the item.
I'll
Do I have a second?
second. This is the Young Leaders Advisory Council. Yeah.
Okay, would the clerk call the roll?
Mayor Benoit?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell?
Aye.
Dr. Parker?
Aye.
Dr. Burke?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
And the two written reports received by Mr. Alatorre. Is there any other business before the admin committee this morning?
Public comment?
No?
Nope. No public comment.
Okay, well, is there any public?
No, there's not.
No public comment.
Excuse.
Don't talk.
Is there any public comment there?
Nope.
No.
No public comment here? Then we will adjourn the admin committee meeting for this morning.
Dr. Burke, I would just like to note that the next administrative committee meeting will be at the board retreat next month.
Okay?